So, if you have a consistent yoga practice and you have the disposition towards flexibility, this class is for you. Over time, right, the initial practice and the resistance that we feel in the postures will eventually recede. Right? But to maintain each posture's vitality, we must now incorporate muscular strength. So, in this class, we'll be utilizing the natural flexibility we have, not exaggerating it, but focusing more on stability. Great, so grab 2 blocks and come to child's pose. Extend your arms forward and press the pinky sides of your arms down so much that your elbows lift. There you go. Feel that engagement in your outer shoulders and flip your palms to the floor. Pull your hands towards your knees and start to shift yourself forward. Pushing your hands forward, your hips will move back towards your heels. Now do that a few more times. This exercise is slightly different from cat-cow, right? Trying to create a long line through that central axis of your body and really starting to feel the initiation of pushing the front of your mat forward so your hips move back and pulling your hands towards your knees so your chest moves forward. Through this dynamic movement now, this is a great opportunity to initiate your breath. Tuck your toes now and start to lift your knees up away from the ground. And I mean like really tuck your toes, moving the balls of your feet underneath your heels. Pull your hands towards your knees and move your knees towards your hands so the front body engages. Great, keep that downward facing dog. If you pull your hands towards your feet, you might feel those outer lats engage. We're looking for that. Step your right foot forward and reach your right arm forward. Get long through the outer right waistline and then reach your left arm forward so that both arms extend forward just like they were doing in child's pose. Keep your torso hovering above your right thigh and take a few breaths. Let that go. Come up onto your fingertips in plank pose and see what that does. I always notice that this lifts the core a little bit more. Right on, downward facing dog. Step your left leg forward. Okay, reach and extend your left arm forward. And on this side, you might even be able to notice the outer left hip is going to hug in a little bit more. Yeah, so there's a sense of compactness through the outer hips. Right? As you reach your arms forward, hovering your torso above your left leg, get really long through that right leg as well. And let that go. Again, fingertips, step your left leg back. Downward facing dog. Plank pose. Keeping your toes tucked, move your hips towards your forearms and move your shoulders onto your back. So it's a variation of up dog. Then bending your elbows, keeping your shoulders onto your back. There's a chaturanga variation. And then plank pose. All right. Release your knees down to the ground and sit onto your heels. I'm just going to spread your finger toes out to the side. I say that because my toes are like fingers. Just spread your toes out wide, interlacing your fingers, and flip your palms up to the ceiling. And as you flip your palms up towards the ceiling, start to lift your outer shoulders up. Yeah, let them rise. Let your outer ribs start to lift up off of your waist so that your waistline even gets longer. Right? And then you can alternate your interlace of your fingers and flip your palms up a little bit more. Feel those outer hips, again, compacting in towards the midline. And as you reach your arms up, your heels actually might bear a little less weight. And if you ever need, you can always, take a break, give your arms a rest. But find your breath here. Right? With those arms lifted, you might even find a little bit more space through the rib cage. let that go. Release your hands down, and then let's straighten out the legs. Let the backs of the knees kind of open up. You'll take your hands and place them underneath your feet, separating your middle finger and your ring finger apart, like a live long and prosper Star Trek style. Just bring your hands underneath your feet so that your toes tickle your wrists, and then shift forward as you bend your elbows wide. Right? Let your elbows go wide, let your shoulders go wide, chin to chest, and let that go. Nice, releasing. Come all the way up. Find your blocks. You're going to take those 2 blocks in your hands, and I face the long edge of my mat, but you can face anyway. Your feet are going to be hips width apart, bending your knees slightly like a chair pose, but tip your torso forward. With your blocks in either hands, start this kind of flapping action of your arms, like you're a long-winged bird, right? And as you're doing this, right, as you're lifting your blocks up, move the shoulders onto your back, and then bring those blocks together. So again, we're strengthening the back as well as strengthening the pecs and the chest. There you go, pressing those big toes down, outer hips still hugging in so the knees and the toes face the same direction. And let that go. Bringing your blocks towards the front short end of your mat. Half lift. And then step your left leg back so it's a meter's distance behind your right. The left hand is directly underneath your left shoulder. I like staying up on my fingertips. Just gives the torso a little bit more space. Reaching your right arm out to the right, press your right arm up away from the ground so your back body engages as you twist. Twisting triangle. That left heel, back foot can be down on the floor. If you want a little bit of a modification, you can always lift the left heel, back heel off of the floor. Let your spine turn as you breathe. And then let that go. Moving your blocks forward, step your back foot forward. And you'll switch. Stepping your right leg back. Right heel down. And keep pressing the big toe mound of that left big toe down to the floor. Lengthening your spine, reach your left arm out, and then lift from the chest, lift from the back body to rotate your spine. That arm flapping exercise we were just doing before this was helping the spine, the upper chest, strengthen and integrate, preparing you for this shape. Let that go. Nice. Stepping your back foot forward. All right. We're going to go into a deeper extension. Reach your left leg back. And then release your left knee down. Using the blocks, bring your blocks near your outer hips. And then you'll hinge your hips back to straighten your right leg. Now you can pause here, right? This is a great place to stay. Or you might start to extend your right foot forward any amount so that your hips actually shift forward of your left knee. Some of you might even place a block underneath your right sits bones, underneath the bone, rather than the middle of the hamstring. Okay? Now I'm showing a variation here with the hands on the back of the hips, and you can absolutely stay there as well. Or you can also reach your arms up overhead. Now, if you do have a good amount of flexibility, the goal here is to lift up off of the block by drawing your thighs together. Yeah, you might even get a little higher up. Okay, now if you've gotten into it, start to move your block away, rebend your elbows and start to lower down. But as you lower down, can you keep pulling those feet towards one another so that the low belly lifts, so that there's a rise again through the central axis of the body? And take a breath here and then let that go. Okay, rebending your right knee. You can bring those blocks up to their higher setting and step your back foot forward. Okay, step your right leg back. Releasing that back knee. And I keep the back toes tucked because that will help to align the back knee and the back toes. We want to stay on top of the midline of that back leg, keeping it as much neutral as we can. Tendency will be for the leg to slightly turn out in the back. We don't want that. Now, again, option for the block to come underneath the hip or not, right? You don't have to use the block underneath the hip, right? Stay here for a moment. But if you do choose to put the block underneath your hip, right, we're trying to lift up out of it. Rather than exaggerating the flexibility we have, start to incorporate a little bit of glute, inner thigh, and hamstring strength. Right? You can keep your hands on your hips or lifting your arms up just like you did when you were sitting on your heels, right? Reaching your arms up, try to lift yourself up out of your hips, waist is long, and there's that space for the breath. Let that go. Alrighty. You might stay here or start to descend a little bit lower, maintaining some of that strength that you've created. Back toes are still tucked. Inner right thigh, that back thigh spinning up towards the ceiling. And let that go. Okay, slowly rebend the back knee, rebend the front knee, move the blocks forward, and step forward. You can put those blocks away. Okay, you're gonna come back to downward facing dog. Take a couple breaths. And then release your knees down. Okay, you're gonna widen your feet, bring your knees all the way together. Place the top of your head down onto the ground and start to kind of drag your calves back as you sit down between your heels. Now, if you get to this place and you realize that your hips are hovering above the floor, place something underneath your hips, like a blanket or one of those blocks. Give yourself some support. We also want to avoid any kind of sensation in the knee joint itself. Place my hands down onto the floor, right, just for support, and I'm trying to lift my hips up off of the floor. Right? And that comes from that outer hips hugging in action. Now you can stay seated, or you can start to come down onto your forearms like I have. Right? You can start to press your elbows down and start to tone the back of the glutes down towards the knees. And again, that's another great place to stay. Another last option might be to lay all the way down, reaching your arms overhead, holding opposite elbows. Same things apply. Those outer hips are hugging in, the outer knees are drawing towards the midline. And as you drag the back of the glutes towards your knees, you might feel your hamstrings now engage and strengthen. Okay? If you've laid down, you've got a good ways to come out. So come out slowly. Come back up onto your forearms. And pause, yeah. And then you can come up onto your hands. And pause. And then slowly come forward. So another word of wisdom, right? If you had to sit on something, on a block or a blanket, stay there, right? Stay where your body needs you to stay. Okay, just take a child's pose, hips to heels. And since this practice is for those of us who have been practicing for some time, we're going to do headstand. Okay? If you would like a little bit more information on headstand, I do have a tutorial available to you on my website for free. So feel free to take a look at that. But, all right, reaching up, feel free to also go next to a wall. We want you to be safe. Pressing more weight into your forearms than the top of your head. Lift your shoulders away from your ears. I'm just starting to play around with my legs again today, just bringing the outer thighs hugging in towards the midline, a little eagle variation through the legs. It works that similar sense of the outer hips hugging in, of the legs adducting towards the midline. There you go, and then slowly come on down. And then give yourself another nice, generous rest in child's pose. And this is where I'm going to stay for a bit. Just to tap back into that breath. Of course, if you want to recline, right, lay on your back, or take a seated meditation, you're welcome to as well. But But so often, right, in the physical practice, and when we get really caught up in the structure of the postures, we can sometimes lose, right, the intimacy of our breath or the experience of what we are actually doing in the moment. And so taking this time to pause, either in child's pose or a seated meditation, or even just laying on your back, is a great opportunity to check in. Namaste.